What happens when a species that conquered half the galaxy meets the one species they never expected to find dangerous? When Princess Zarayath of the mighty Vortak Empire first laid eyes on the human ambassador, she saw nothing more than a primitive creature wrapped in strange fabric. Little did she know that beneath that simple suit lay the most terrifying secret in the universe, one that would shake the foundations of her empire and redefine what it meant to be truly powerful. The Vortaks had crushed civilizations that could bend reality itself. They had enslaved races that could manipulate time. They had conquered beings of pure energy. But they had never encountered something as deceptively simple, yet impossibly complex, as a human in a business suit. This is the story of how one question from an arrogant alien princess would lead to the most shocking revelation in galactic history, and how humanity's greatest strength was never what anyone expected it to be. For the crystalline spires of the Vortak Imperial Palace pierced the purple sky of Zenthri Prime like gleaming daggers, each one a testament to the Empire's dominance over 300 conquered worlds. Within the grandest spire, Princess Zarayath of the Royal House of Veltar stood before the massive viewing window of the diplomatic reception hall, her 6 arms crossed in a display of barely contained impatience. Her chitinous exoskeleton gleamed with the deep blue-black of Vortak nobility, and her 4 eyes tracked the approaching shuttle with predatory focus. Today marked a historic moment, the first official diplomatic contact with a species that had somehow managed to remain hidden from the Empire's vast intelligence network until recently. The humans, as they called themselves, had emerged from a small cluster of systems on the outer rim, apparently having developed faster than light travel independently. The very notion was almost insulting to Zarayath's sensibilities. Her people had been masters of the galaxy for over 2 millennia, and the idea that some primitive species could develop such technology without their knowledge was both fascinating and irritating. The shuttle that approached was laughably primitive by Vortak standards. Where their vessels were sleek organic growths that melded biology with technology, the human craft was nothing more than metal plates welded together with visible seams. It moved with the grace of a dying asteroid, its chemical propulsion systems spewing primitive exhaust that would have been embarrassing to display in civilized space. Yet somehow, impossibly, it had traveled here through hyperspace using technology the Empire's greatest scientists claimed should not have been possible with such crude materials. "My princess," came the gravelly voice of General Krexmoth, her military advisor and one of the few beings in the palace who dared speak to her without invitation. His massive form, easily twice the height of most Vortaks, cast a shadow across the viewing chamber as he approached. Battle scars covered his exoskeleton like a roadmap of conquest, each one representing a world brought to heel beneath the Empire's might. The human delegation has requested permission to dock. Their communication methods are quaint. Zarayath allowed herself a small clicking sound of amusement. Quaint. Yes, I imagine they are. Very well, General. Let us see what these creatures have to say for themselves. But maintain full security protocols. We know nothing of their capabilities beyond their crude FTL technology. The docking proceeded without incident, though the human shuttle's primitive magnetic clamps took several embarrassing minutes to achieve proper seal with the palace's biomechanical docking ports. Through the organic viewing membrane that served as a window, Zarayath could see movement within the craft. The humans appeared to be donning some sort of protective gear, which struck her as odd given that the palace's atmosphere had been specifically adjusted to accommodate their known biological requirements. When the airlock finally cycled open, what emerged was perhaps the most underwhelming sight Zarayath had ever witnessed in her 3 centuries of life. The human delegation consisted of only 3 individuals, each wrapped in what appeared to be carefully tailored fabric coverings. The lead figure, presumably their ambassador, wore a dark covering that the intelligence briefings had identified as a suit, apparently a form of protective garment worn for formal occasions. The human was smaller than she had expected, standing barely chest-high to an average Vortak. Its skin was a pale pinkish hue that seemed almost translucent in the palace's bioluminescent lighting, and its small eyes darted about nervously as it took in the grandeur of the reception chamber. Most peculiar of all, it had only 2 arms and 2 legs, a body configuration that seemed impossibly inefficient for any sort of meaningful work. "Your Imperial Highness," the human said, its voice carried by a primitive translation device clipped to its suit jacket. The device added an electronic warble to its words that made it sound even more artificial than the already simple language structure. "I am Ambassador James Chun of the United Earth Federation. It is an honor to stand before the magnificent Vortak Empire. Zaraeth descended from her elevated platform with fluid grace, her 6 arms moving in the complex patterns that conveyed polite interest tinged with superiority. The human's eyes followed her movement with what appeared to be genuine appreciation for the display, which was at least marginally more intelligent than most newly contacted species managed. Ambassador Chen, she replied, her own voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked highborn Vorthak speech. Welcome to Zen-3 Prime. Your species has accomplished something interesting in reaching our space independently. We are curious to learn more about your people and your methods. The human smiled, an expression that involved baring its primitive grinding teeth. Zaraeth had been briefed that this was apparently a sign of friendliness among humans, though it struck her as vaguely threatening. We're equally curious about your great empire, Your Highness. Our scientists have been fascinated by what little we've learned of your technology. The way your ships seem to grow rather than being built, the biological integration with mechanical systems, it's beyond our current understanding. General Krexmoth stepped forward, his massive bulk making the humans step back involuntarily. Your current understanding is primitive in most respects, he rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories. We have observed your worlds. Your technology is crude, your society fractured, your military capabilities, negligible. It is only through some cosmic accident that you achieved interstellar flight at all. Ambassador Chen's expression shifted slightly, though Zaraeth found human facial expressions difficult to read with any precision. Perhaps, he said carefully. We've always been resourceful, though. Human ingenuity has gotten us this far. Ingenuity, Zaraeth repeated, tasting the foreign concept. An interesting word. Tell me, Ambassador, your species appears to lack any obvious advantages. You have no natural armor, no enhanced physical capabilities, no apparent psychic abilities. You cannot even survive in natural space environments without artificial aid. What exactly makes you believe you have anything to offer the Empire? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Behind the ambassador, his 2 companions shifted nervously, their hands moving to adjust their suit jackets in what appeared to be an unconscious gesture. Ambassador Chen, however, seemed to consider the question seriously. That's a fair point, Your Highness, he said finally. We know we're not the strongest or fastest or most naturally gifted species. But we've learned that sometimes the greatest strength isn't what you can do with your body, it's what you can do with your mind. Your mind, General Krexmoth snorted dismissively. We have examined your neural patterns. Your brain capacity is marginally adequate, nothing more. Your processing speed is laughably slow compared to truly advanced species. Your memory retention is poor, and your logical reasoning is constantly clouded by emotional responses. In what way do you consider your minds to be assets? Ambassador Chen's smile widened, and, for the first time, Zaraeth detected something that might have been amusement in his posture. General, if I may ask, how many worlds has the Vorthak Empire conquered through direct military force? 273, Krexmoth replied immediately, pride evident in his voice. Each one brought to heel by the might of our fleets and the superiority of our warriors. Impressive, Chen nodded. And how many through negotiation and diplomacy? 37, the general answered, though with less enthusiasm. And how many through economic pressure or technological dependence? Krexmoth hesitated. Such indirect methods are not the Vorthak way. I see. Chen clasped his hands behind his back, a gesture that somehow made him appear more confident despite his smaller stature. In the past century, humanity has brought 47 different colony worlds and space habitats under our political and economic influence. We've done this without firing a single shot in most cases. Zaraeth felt her interest sharpen. Explain. We offered them things they needed, Chen said simply. Better agricultural techniques that increased their food production. Medical knowledge that extended their lifespans. Entertainment and education that enriched their cultures. Manufacturing processes that improved their standard of living. In return, they chose to align themselves with our Federation. Chose, General Krexmoth repeated skeptically. You speak as though you gave them options. We did. That's the point. We found that beings who choose to work with you are far more productive and reliable than those who are forced to serve. Chen's expression grew more serious. Your empire has lasted 2,000 years through strength and fear. That's certainly impressive. But human history is full of empires that thought strength was enough. Most of them fell not to stronger enemies, but to the simple fact that ruling through fear is exhausting and, ultimately, unsustainable. The reception chamber fell silent except for the soft bioluminescent pulsing of the walls. Zaraeth found herself studying the human with new attention. His words carried an implication that she found both intriguing and vaguely insulting. You speak as though the empire is somehow fragile, she said carefully. Chen shook his head. Not fragile, Your Highness. Magnificent, powerful, and undoubtedly capable of crushing any direct military threat. But, perhaps, limited in its options. Limited how? Well, Chen said, and now his smile carried something that might have been genuine curiosity. What happens when you encounter a problem that can't be solved by superior firepower or intimidation? What happens when you face a challenge that requires cooperation, creativity, or adaptation? General Krexmatha's exoskeleton bristled with indignation. The Empire has faced every challenge the galaxy could offer for 2 millennia. We have conquered energy beings, time manipulators, and reality benders. What challenge could possibly exist that our methods could not handle? Ambassador Chen was quiet for a long moment, his small eyes studying both Zaraeth and the general with an intensity that was beginning to make the princess feel oddly uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke. Princess Zaraeth, if I may be so bold, you asked what advantages humanity might possess. You mentioned our lack of natural armor, our physical limitations, our need for artificial protection in hostile environments. He gestured to his suit jacket. You observed that we wrap ourselves in fabric coverings. I wonder, have you considered what might be hidden beneath this simple suit? The question struck Zaraeth as odd, almost absurdly so. She looked at the human's covering more carefully. It appeared to be nothing more than woven plant fibers dyed dark blue, tailored to fit the human's simple body structure. Decorative, perhaps, but hardly significant. I see fabric, she said simply. Primitive protective covering. Perhaps some basic electronics for environmental monitoring. Chen's smile became something entirely different, not the friendly baring of teeth from before, but something that carried depths she couldn't quite fathom. Would you like to know what's really under this suit, Your Highness? The challenge was clear, though Zaraeth couldn't understand why the human was making it. What could possibly be hidden beneath such simple covering that would be of any significance? Yet something in Ambassador Chen's tone suggested that this was more than idle curiosity. Very well, she said, her 4 eyes focusing on him with predatory intensity. Enlighten me, Ambassador. What secrets does humanity hide beneath its crude fabric coverings? Chen began to move his hands toward his jacket, and Zaraeth suddenly realized that she had no idea what to expect. For the first time in her very long life, she found herself genuinely uncertain about what she was about to discover. The answer, she suspected, was about to change everything. Ambassador Chen's hands moved with deliberate slowness as he began to unbutton his suit jacket. The motion was casual, almost dismissive, yet every being in the reception chamber found themselves watching with an intensity that surprised them. Princess Zaraeth felt her breathing slow, her 4 eyes tracking each small movement with predatory focus. Your Highness, Chen said conversationally as he worked at the buttons, before I show you what's beneath this suit, perhaps you could indulge my curiosity about something. In all your empire's conquests, have you ever encountered a species that modified themselves? The question seemed to come from nowhere, and Zaraeth found herself momentarily off balance. Modified? In what sense? Improved their natural capabilities through artificial means. Enhanced their bodies, augmented their minds, integrated technology directly into their biological systems. Chen's jacket fell open, revealing what appeared to be a simple white undershirt beneath. Nothing remarkable. It's actually quite common among developing species. The Vortax must have seen it dozens of times. General Krexmoth snorted dismissively. Of course we have. Crude cybernetic implants, primitive genetic manipulation, basic biomechanical integration. The Zephari tried to enhance their warriors with metal limbs. The Colmex attempted to boost their intelligence with neural computers. the Telvanni even tried to merge their consciousness with their machines. His voice carried the satisfaction of someone recounting victories. All of them failed. Artificial enhancement makes a species brittle, dependent, vulnerable. Natural superiority always triumphs in the end. Interesting perspective, Chen mused, beginning to unbutton his shirt. And, you're absolutely right, of course. Crude enhancement does tend to create weaknesses. The problem is that most species try to add new capabilities on top of their existing biology. They bolt metal onto flesh, they wire circuits into brains, they try to force their natural systems to interface with artificial ones. He paused in his undressing to look directly at Zaraeth. But, what if you took the opposite approach? Opposite how? Zaraeth found herself asking, though she wasn't entirely sure why the question mattered. Chen's shirt came off, revealing what appeared to be another layer of white fabric beneath. A simple undershirt, just as primitive as everything else about him. Yet he continued speaking as though he were revealing something significant. Instead of adding artificial components to natural biology, what if you redesigned the biology from the ground up? What if you didn't try to enhance what nature gave you, but instead created something entirely new that just happened to look natural? The princess felt a cold sensation beginning in the pit of her stomach. Something in the human's tone suggested that this wasn't a theoretical discussion. Ambassador, what exactly are you implying? I'm saying, Your Highness, that sometimes the most advanced technology is the kind you can't see. Chen pulled off the undershirt, and Zaraeth's world suddenly shifted. What she saw should have been skin. Pink, soft, vulnerable human flesh stretched over primitive bone and muscle. Instead, she found herself looking at something that defied immediate comprehension. The ambassador's torso was covered in what appeared to be skin, but, as she watched, patterns began to emerge beneath the surface. Not scars or tattoos, but something that moved and flowed like living circuitry. My God, whispered one of Chen's companions, apparently seeing something that wasn't visible to the Vortex yet. Chen turned slightly, and the light caught his skin differently. What had appeared to be normal human flesh suddenly revealed itself to be something far more complex. Beneath the surface, Zaraeth could now see a network of what looked like crystalline pathways, pulsing with soft bioluminescent energy. They branched and flowed across his entire visible anatomy like the neural network of some vast organic computer. 700 years ago, Chen said conversationally, as though he weren't revealing something that challenged every assumption the princess had ever held about human limitations, humanity faced a choice. We could remain as nature made us, soft, slow, short-lived, and limited, or we could become something more. Something better. General Krexmoff took a step back, his military instincts finally recognizing a potential threat. What are you? We're still human, Chen replied simply. We just optimized the design. He flexed his fingers, and Zaraeth could see the crystalline pathways brightening and shifting beneath what she now realized wasn't skin at all, but some sort of incredibly sophisticated biosynthetic covering. Every cell in my body has been redesigned from the molecular level up. My bones are carbon fiber lattices that are lighter than titanium and stronger than diamond. My muscles are biomechanical actuators that can generate forces that would crush your exoskeletons. My nervous system processes information at quantum speeds through integrated bio-optical pathways. The princess found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. That's impossible. Our sensors detected no artificial components. Our medical scans showed normal human biology. Chen smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely terrifying because it was so perfectly, naturally human despite everything he had just revealed. That's because there are no artificial components, Your Highness. Everything you're looking at is biological. We didn't add machines to humans, we redesigned humans to be living machines. He began walking toward them, and Zaraeth noticed that his footsteps made no sound despite the hard crystalline floor. His movement was too fluid, too perfect, lacking the small inefficiencies that marked natural motion. The skin you're seeing isn't skin, it's a biosynthetic membrane that can harden to deflect energy weapons or soften to appear perfectly natural. The pathways beneath aren't just decorative. They're data conduits allowing every cell in my body to communicate at light speed. My brain isn't augmented, it's been completely reconstructed as a quantum biological computer that can process information faster than your best AIs. General Krexmatha's hand moved toward his weapon, but Chen simply looked at him and the general's arm stopped moving. Not because of any visible force, but because something in the human's gaze suggested that drawing a weapon would be a very, very bad idea. The beautiful thing about our approach, Chen continued, is that we didn't lose our humanity in the process. We're still creative, still emotional, still capable of forming bonds and making sacrifices for others. We just became capable of backing up those qualities with capabilities that your empire never suspected possible. Our intelligence reports, Zarayath said slowly, trying to maintain some semblance of composure, indicated that humans were primitive. Technologically limited. Militarily weak. Those reports were accurate, Chen agreed cheerfully. Baseline humans are all of those things. But there haven't been any baseline humans in positions of authority for over 2 centuries. Everyone you've been observing, everyone your spies have been reporting on, everyone your empire believes represents humanity, we're all like this. The implications hit Zarayath like a physical blow. If what the human was saying was true, then every assessment the empire had made about human capabilities was not just wrong, but catastrophically wrong. How many of you are there? All of us, Chen said simply. Every human in our federation has undergone the enhancement process. It's not optional, it's considered a basic right of citizenship. Why would we allow anyone to remain limited by the biological lottery of natural birth when we can give them capabilities that let them truly flourish? One of Chen's companions stepped forward, a woman who had been silent throughout the exchange. She began removing her own jacket, revealing the same biosynthetic skin with its network of glowing pathways. Ambassador, should we show them the defensive capabilities? I think that might be premature, Dr. Martinez, Chen replied. Though perhaps a small demonstration would be educational. He held out his hand, palm up, and Zarayath watched as the skin began to shift and change. What had appeared solid became translucent, then transparent, revealing the complex biomechanical structures beneath. Where bone should have been, she saw latticed carbon fiber so intricate it looked like crystal and art. Where muscles should have been, she saw bundles of biosynthetic actuators that pulsed with controlled energy. Our strength isn't just in what we can do physically, Chen explained as his hand returned to its normal appearance. It's in how we think. Every human you'll encounter can process information at rates that make your best computers look primitive. We can run complex simulations in our heads, model social and economic systems in real time, predict outcomes with accuracy that approaches precognition. We don't just have enhanced bodies, we have enhanced minds that can see patterns and possibilities that other species miss. Dr. Martinez nodded. It's why our diplomatic approach has been so successful. When you can model every possible outcome of a negotiation before it begins, when you can predict exactly how each party will respond to specific incentives, when you can design win-win scenarios that account for psychological factors most species don't even realize they have, it becomes very easy to get what you want without anyone feeling like they've lost anything. The silence in the reception chamber was deafening. Zarayath felt as though the foundation of her understanding of the galaxy had been pulled out from under her. Everything the Empire represented, everything they had built their identity on, suddenly seemed fragile and primitive in comparison to what she was seeing. Your empire, Chen said gently, apparently reading her distress in ways she hadn't realized were possible, is magnificent. 2,000 years of expansion and conquest is genuinely impressive. You've built something that has brought stability and order to hundreds of worlds. But you've done it through a single approach, overwhelming force applied by naturally superior biology. He gestured around the reception chamber, taking in the biomechanical architecture that had seemed so advanced just minutes before. What you've built here is remarkable, but it's fundamentally limited because it's based on enhancing what you already were rather than reimagining what you could become. You've created better Vorthacks, but you're still Vorthacks. Your thinking, your approaches, your solutions, they're all constrained by the patterns established by your natural neural architecture. And humans are not? General Krexmoth asked, though his voice had lost much of its earlier confidence. Not anymore, Dr. Martinez answered. We kept the creativity and emotional intelligence that made us human, but we redesigned our cognitive architecture to transcend the limitations that held us back. We can think in ways that natural biology never allowed. We can consider possibilities that organic minds can't process. We can maintain perspectives that would drive unenhanced beings insane. Chen began putting his shirt back on, the casual gesture somehow making his revelations even more disturbing. The 47 worlds that chose to align with our Federation? They didn't choose us because we offered them better deals than they could get elsewhere. They chose us because we offered them deals that were so perfectly calibrated to their needs, desires, and psychological profiles that refusing would have felt like refusing paradise itself. You manipulated them, Zarayath said, though without much conviction. We understood them, Chen corrected. Completely and perfectly. We modeled their societies, their cultures, their individual psychological makeups, and we designed relationships that would benefit everyone involved. The difference is that we had the cognitive capacity to see solutions that they couldn't imagine and that other species couldn't conceive. He straightened his tie with movements that seemed perfectly human despite everything she now knew about what lay beneath his clothing. Your empire faces challenges, Princess. Resource depletion in core systems. Rebellion brewing in the outer territories. Economic inefficiencies created by ruling through fear rather than cooperation. Military overstretch as you attempt to control too many worlds with too few truly loyal forces. Each point hit like a precisely aimed weapon, because each one was accurate. These were the classified problems that kept the Imperial Council awake at night, the threats that they discussed only in the most secure chambers. How could this human possibly know about them? We know because we've been watching, learning, and analyzing for decades, Dr. Martinez said, apparently reading Zarayath's expression with disturbing accuracy. Our enhanced cognitive capabilities allow us to process vast amounts of data and identify patterns that others miss. We can predict societal trends, economic collapses, and political upheavals with remarkable precision. Chen finished buttoning his jacket, once again appearing to be nothing more than a primitively dressed representative of a backward species. The transformation was so complete that Zarayath almost wondered if she had imagined the last few minutes. The question now, he said pleasantly, is what happens next. Your empire can continue on its current path, maintaining control through force, dealing with problems through conquest, limiting itself to solutions that fit within traditional Vortak thinking patterns. Or what? Zarayath asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Or you can consider the possibility that there might be better ways to achieve your goals. Ways that don't require constant military action, that don't drain your resources, that don't create the endless cycle of rebellion and suppression that characterizes most empires built on force. The princess found herself staring at the human ambassador with new understanding. What she had initially perceived as weakness, the small stature, the lack of natural weapons, the need for protective clothing, suddenly seemed like a deliberate misdirection. Everything about humanity was designed to appear harmless while concealing capabilities that dwarfed anything the Empire had ever encountered. What exactly are you proposing? She asked finally. Chen's smile was perfectly human and utterly terrifying. Nothing at all, Your Highness. I'm simply here to establish diplomatic relations and, perhaps engage in some cultural exchange. What you choose to do with the information I've shared is entirely up to you. But, Zarayath understood now that the choice was an illusion. Humanity had just revealed that they possessed capabilities that made the Empire's advantages meaningless, and they had done it in such a way that any aggressive response would be obviously futile. The humans weren't making demands, they were simply making it clear that resistance was pointless and cooperation was the only logical choice. It was, she realized, the most sophisticated form of conquest she had ever witnessed. And the truly terrifying part was that she was beginning to think they might be right. The emergency session of the Imperial Council had been called within an hour of Ambassador Chen's revelation, and now Princess Zarayath found herself standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, trying to explain why everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The council chamber deep within the palace's core was a marvel of biomechanical architecture, its living walls pulsing with the neural networks that connected every important decision-making node in the Empire. 12 of the most senior Vortak leaders sat in their organic thrones, their exoskeletons gleaming with the accumulated honors of centuries of conquest. Emperor Veltar himself presided from the central position, his massive form dwarfing even General Krexmoth. At nearly 4 centuries old, he represented the pinnacle of Vorthak evolution, naturally enhanced strength, speed, and intelligence that had made him the undisputed master of known space. His 4 eyes studied his daughter with an intensity that would have withered lesser beings. You claim, his voice rumbled through the chamber's acoustic enhancement systems, that these humans have somehow concealed their true nature from our intelligence apparatus for decades. That they possess capabilities that exceed our own. That they have effectively neutralized our advantages without us even realizing it. The Emperor's tone carried the weight of skeptical authority. These are extraordinary claims, daughter. Which require extraordinary evidence, added Council Member Thexera, her ancient voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. Our sensors detected nothing unusual about the human delegation. Our medical scans showed primitive biology. Our psychological profiles indicated limited cognitive capacity. Are you suggesting that our entire intelligence infrastructure has been systematically deceived? Before Zaraeth could respond, the chamber's communication array activated with an incoming priority transmission. The biomechanical walls shifted and flowed, creating a 3-dimensional display space in the center of the room. What materialized was the image of Admiral Korthven, the Empire's most decorated military commander, broadcasting from the command deck of the Imperial flagship. Your Imperial Majesty, the Admiral said without preamble, we have a situation developing in the Sol system. Long-range sensors have detected what appears to be a massive fleet mobilization around Earth and its colonies. Emperor Veltar leaned forward, his attention immediately focused. Define massive, Admiral. At least 3,000 vessels, Majesty. Our initial assessment suggested they were civilian transports and industrial ships. However, our enhanced scans are revealing capabilities that don't match their apparent configuration. The Admiral's voice carried a note of uncertainty that was deeply unsettling coming from the Empire's most experienced military leader. They appear to be moving in formation toward the edge of human space, but their energy signatures are unusual. Unusual how? General Krexmoth demanded, rising from his position to study the tactical display that was now accompanying the Admiral's transmission. The ships appear to be generating power levels that exceed what should be possible from the reactor configurations we've observed. Some of the larger vessels are showing energy output that rivals our battleships, despite appearing to be nothing more than cargo haulers. Admiral Korthven paused, clearly struggling with what he was reporting. Additionally, we're detecting weapon signatures that don't match any known human technology. These appear to be energy-based systems of unknown capability. Princess Zaraeth felt a cold certainty settling in her stomach. Admiral, what is the heading of this fleet? They appear to be moving toward the Kepler boundary, the edge of human-claimed space. However, their trajectory would put them in position to reach Vorthak territory within 36 hours at current speed. The silence that followed was profound. Every member of the council understood the implications. If humanity had somehow concealed a military force of that magnitude, and if they possessed weapons technology that exceeded current assessments, then the Empire might be facing a threat unlike anything they had encountered in their 2 millennia of dominance. Your Majesty, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance. Ambassador Chen stood in the doorway, flanked by his 2 companions but no visible guards. Somehow, he had gained access to the most secure location in the Empire without triggering any alarms or alerting any security personnel. The implications of this simple fact were almost as disturbing as his earlier revelations. How did you get in here? General Krexmoth roared, his hand moving to his sidearm. I asked politely, Chen replied with that same unsettling human smile. Your security systems are quite impressive, but they're designed to detect and stop threats that think and move like known species. They're not really equipped to handle someone who can model their behavioral patterns and predict their responses with perfect accuracy. Emperor Veltar studied the human with new attention. You were listening to our private council session. Your bioacoustic systems are actually quite easy to tap into if you understand the harmonic frequencies involved, Dr. Martinez said conversationally. We've been monitoring all communications within the palace since we arrived. Not to spy, exactly, but to ensure our safety and to better understand how your decision-making processes work. You admit to espionage, Council Member Thexera hissed, her voice rising in pitch with indignation. I admit to being thorough, Chen corrected gently. But, since Admiral Korthvan seems concerned about our fleet movements, perhaps this would be a good time for a more complete demonstration of human capabilities. He gestured to his companion, who Zarayath now realized she hadn't been properly introduced to. The man was older than Chen, with graying hair and lines around his eyes that suggested either great age or great stress. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that reminded her uncomfortably of her father's. I'm Admiral Sarah Mitchell, the woman said, and Zarayath realized she had misidentified the gender. Commander of the Human Federation Defense Force. The fleet your admiral is observing represents approximately 3% of our total military capacity. 3%? Admiral Korthven's voice crackled through the communication array, disbelief evident even through the transmission static. The vast majority of our military assets are distributed throughout human space in configurations that your sensors would identify as civilian infrastructure, Admiral Mitchell explained. Manufacturing stations, agricultural platforms, research facilities, even entertainment complexes can be reconfigured as military assets within minutes. It's a design philosophy that makes our true capabilities almost impossible to assess through external observation. She moved to the center of the chamber, her movements carrying the same unnaturally perfect fluidity that Chen had demonstrated. Would you like me to show you what 3% of our military capacity actually means? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's wall suddenly erupted with new data feeds. Tactical displays, sensor readings, and communication intercepts flooded the space with information that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside the Empire's highest security clearance. These are our defense network feeds, General Krexmoth said in amazement. How are you accessing classified Imperial communications? Your quantum encryption protocols are actually quite elegant, the third member of the human delegation said, speaking for the first time. Zarayath noticed that he was younger than the others, but his eyes held the same disturbing depth of knowledge. But they're based on mathematical principles that assume certain limitations in processing power. When you can perform quantum calculations at biological speeds, most encryption becomes more of a courtesy than an actual barrier. The displays around them suddenly shifted, showing a real-time view of the human fleet that Admiral Korthven had reported. What Zarayath saw defied everything she thought she understood about space warfare. The ships moved with a precision that suggested they were controlled by a single, unified intelligence. Their formations were geometric impossibilities that somehow managed to provide overlapping fields of fire while maintaining optimal defensive positions. Each vessel in that fleet, Admiral Mitchell said, pointing to the display, is capable of independent action but is also part of a distributed intelligence network that allows them to function as a single organism. Every ship can instantly share tactical data, coordinate responses, and adapt to changing conditions without the communication delays that limit traditional fleet actions. Emperor Veltar rose from his throne, his massive form seeming to fill the chamber. You're threatening the Empire. Not at all, Chen said quickly. We're providing a demonstration. Admiral Mitchell, if you would? The human admiral nodded and spoke a single word that the translation devices didn't catch. Immediately, every display in the chamber shifted to show sensor readings from across Imperial space. Zarayath watched in growing horror as the feeds revealed what appeared to be human ships already positioned throughout Vorthak territory, not as an invasion force, but as part of what looked like a systematic intelligence-gathering operation that had been ongoing for decades. Your border patrol detected and catalogued every one of these vessels as civilian traffic, Admiral Mitchell explained. Traders, researchers, cultural exchange groups, even tourists. All operating with proper documentation, all behaving exactly as expected for their supposed roles. This is impossible, Admiral Korthvan's voice came through the communication array. Our long-range sensors would have detected any military buildup in our territory. Would they? The younger human asked. Your sensors are calibrated to detect the energy signatures and mass configurations of known military technology. But what if the military technology doesn't look like anything you've seen before? The display shifted again, and Zarayath found herself looking at technical schematics that hurt to examine. The diagrams showed ship designs that seemed to violate basic principles of physics, weapon systems that operated on theories she couldn't comprehend, and defensive technologies that treated energy and matter as though they were interchangeable concepts. Our ships don't carry weapons in any sense that you would recognize, Admiral Mitchell continued. Instead, they carry fabrication systems that can create any tool or weapon needed from available materials. A civilian cargo hauler can become a battleship in approximately 4 minutes. A research vessel can deploy defensive systems that would take your shipyards months to construct. Show them the defensive capabilities, Chen said quietly. Admiral Mitchell nodded and spoke another untranslated command. Every sensor display in the chamber suddenly went white, then slowly cleared to reveal a sight that made several council members gasp audibly. The space around Zenthari Prime, previously empty except for the usual civilian traffic, now showed a defensive grid of such complexity and scale that it seemed to have materialized from nowhere. Stealth technology? General Krexmoth asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer was more complicated than that. Reality manipulation, the younger human said simply. We don't hide our ships, we exist in quantum superposition until we choose to collapse into a specific configuration. From your perspective, our defensive fleet both exists and doesn't exist until we decide which state serves our purposes. Princess Zarayath felt the last of her certainties crumbling. How long have you been able to do this? The theoretical framework was developed about 3 centuries ago, Chen answered. Practical applications became possible roughly 200 years ago. We've been refining and improving the technology ever since. He looked around the chamber, taking in the stunned expressions of the council members. The fleet movements that Admiral Korthven detected aren't a threat, they're a repositioning to better protect human space from potential misunderstandings while we conduct these negotiations. Emperor Veltar's voice, when he finally spoke, carried none of his earlier authority. What do you want from us? Nothing at all, Chen said with perfect sincerity. We're not here to conquer, demand tribute, or impose our will. We're here because we believe that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than conflict. Cooperation, Admiral Mitchell added, that acknowledges the reality of what both our civilizations have become. Your empire is magnificent at what it does, organizing, controlling, and maintaining order across vast distances. Our Federation is excellent at solving problems, adapting to new situations, and finding optimal outcomes for complex scenarios. Together, the younger human said, we could accomplish things that neither civilization could achieve alone. Apart, we'll eventually come into conflict, and that would be wasteful for everyone involved. The chamber fell silent as the council absorbed what they had been shown. Zarayath realized that the humans had just demonstrated that they could have destroyed the Empire at any time over the past several decades, but had chosen not to. Instead, they had waited, watched, and learned until they could approach from a position of such overwhelming advantage that resistance was pointless and cooperation was the only logical choice. This is conquest, Council Member Thexera said finally, her voice heavy with defeat. You've simply dressed it up in prettier language than most. Chen shook his head. This is evolution. Your empire can continue to exist exactly as it always has. We're not asking you to change your government, your culture, or your methods. We're simply suggesting that there might be situations where our different approaches could complement each other. And, if we refuse this cooperation? Emperor Veltar asked. Then, you refuse, Admiral Mitchell said with a shrug. We'll withdraw to human space, and you can continue governing your empire as you always have. The only difference will be that you'll do so with the knowledge that there's a civilization nearby that possesses capabilities you can't match. But, that knowledge, Chen added gently, might make some of your current problems more difficult to solve. When your outer territories rebel, they'll know that there's an alternative to imperial rule. When your resources become strained, they'll understand that more efficient methods exist. When your enemies realize that the Empire is no longer the strongest force in the galaxy. He let the implications hang in the air. Princess Zarayath understood now why Chen had asked about what was hidden beneath his suit. It wasn't just about the biological modifications that made humans more than they appeared. It was about the fact that everything they had shown the Empire was also hidden capabilities that existed beneath the surface of what appeared to be a simple, primitive species. The most terrifying part was that she was beginning to think they might actually be offering a genuine partnership rather than demanding surrender. But, the partnership would be between equals, and the Empire had never been equal to anyone. The question now was whether the Empire could learn to be. 3 days had passed since the human demonstration, and Princess Zarayath found herself standing in the palace's most secure chamber, watching as her father paced with the restless energy of a predator who had suddenly discovered he was no longer at the top of the food chain. The Emperor's forearms moved in agitated patterns as he processed the intelligence reports that had been flooding in from across the Empire since Admiral Mitchell's revelations. The reports painted a picture that was both humbling and terrifying. Human civilians had been operating throughout Imperial space for decades, and, now that the intelligence services knew what to look for, their true scope became apparent. Trade negotiations that had seemed simply advantageous now revealed themselves as carefully orchestrated economic maneuvers. Cultural exchange programs had been systematic intelligence-gathering operations. Even entertainment exports from human space appeared to have been designed to subtly influence Imperial citizens toward more cooperative mindsets. 47 worlds, Emperor Veltar rumbled, his voice carrying frustrated amazement. 47 separate instances of our intelligence services cataloging human activities as harmless civilian interaction. Not one of our analysts suspected that they were looking at the most sophisticated infiltration operation in galactic history. Council member Thexera, who had spent the last 3 days reviewing every human contact in Imperial records, looked up from her data displays with exhausted frustration. It's worse than that, Majesty. Our economic analysts have determined that human trade activities have actually improved conditions in every system where they've operated. Unemployment down, productivity up, citizen satisfaction increased across all metrics. They've been conquering us by making our lives better. General Krexmoth stood at attention near the chamber's tactical displays, his normally confident bearing replaced by the careful posture of someone who had realized his expertise was suddenly obsolete. Our military assessment teams have completed their analysis of the human defensive capabilities. Their conclusion is that a direct military confrontation would result in the complete destruction of the Imperial fleet within approximately 6 hours. 6 hours, the Emperor repeated, his voice hollow. To destroy a military force that has dominated known space for 2 millennia. Their weapons technology operates on principles our physicists are still trying to understand, Krexmoth continued. Energy matter conversion, quantum manipulation, reality alteration at the subatomic level. We're not just outmatched, we're fighting with stone tools against opponents who can reshape the fundamental nature of existence. Princess Zariath had been silent throughout the briefing, her mind working through the implications of everything they had learned. Finally, she spoke. Father, we're approaching this from the wrong perspective. The Emperor turned his attention to her, his 4 eyes focusing with sharp interest. Explain. We keep talking about this as though we've been defeated, as though the humans have somehow cheated or deceived us. But, consider what they've actually done. Zariath moved to the center of the chamber, her 6 arms gesturing as she organized her thoughts. They identified a potential threat, the Vorthak Empire, and, instead of attacking or hiding, they chose to study us. They learned our languages, our customs, our economic systems, our military capabilities. Then, they positioned themselves to understand us better than we understand ourselves. Your point being? Council member Thexera asked with barely concealed impatience. My point is that this isn't conquest, it's the most sophisticated diplomatic preparation in galactic history. They didn't infiltrate our space to weaken us. They did it to figure out how to approach us without triggering a conflict that would be devastating for both sides. Emperor Veltar stopped pacing, his massive form going still as he considered his daughter's words. You believe their claims of seeking cooperation are genuine? I believe they're pragmatic, Zariath replied. Think about it from their perspective. They possess capabilities that make military conquest trivial. If they wanted to destroy the Empire, they could have done so at any time over the past several decades. Instead, they've spent enormous time and resources learning how to communicate with us, understand our motivations, and find ways to align our interests with theirs. Or they've been preparing for the most comprehensive conquest in galactic history, General Krexmoth countered grimly. Know your enemy completely before you strike. Before Zariath could respond, the chamber's communication array activated with an incoming transmission request. What surprised everyone was that it wasn't coming through normal diplomatic channels, it was arriving through the palace's most secure military networks, channels that supposedly no external entity could access. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Federation Defense Force, came a familiar voice, though the title was different from what they had heard before. I'm requesting permission to enter the palace for a follow-up discussion with the Imperial Council. Emperor Veltar exchanged glances with his advisors before activating the response system. Admiral Chen? I was under the impression that you were an ambassador. I am both, Your Majesty. In human society, we don't maintain rigid separations between diplomatic, military, and scientific roles. Every citizen is capable of functioning in multiple capacities as needed. Chen's voice carried its usual calm reasonableness, but now that they knew what he was, the tone seemed more ominous than reassuring. I have additional information that I believe the Council needs to consider before making any final decisions about our relationship. What sort of information? Council member Thexera demanded. Intelligence regarding threats to the Empire that extend beyond our little diplomatic situation, Chen replied. Threats that you're probably not aware of yet, but that are developing rapidly enough to require immediate attention. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Finally, Emperor Veltar spoke. Permission granted. Report to the Council chamber immediately. Already here, Your Majesty, Chen said, and the chamber's entrance dilated to admit the human delegation. What struck Zarayath immediately was that their appearance had changed subtly. They still wore their simple suits, but now those suits seemed to carry an air of authority that hadn't been present before. It was as though they had dropped the pretense of being merely diplomatic visitors. Admiral, Emperor Veltar said with careful formality, you mentioned threats to the Empire. Chen nodded and gestured to Dr. Martinez, who produced a device that Zarayath didn't recognize. When activated, it projected a three-dimensional star map that showed the galaxy in far more detail than any imperial chart she had ever seen. Your empire, Chen began, controls approximately 37% of habitable systems in this galactic region. Another 42% are either uninhabited or occupied by pre-spaceflight civilizations. The remaining 21% are controlled by various independent species, most of which pose no significant threat to imperial interests. The star map shifted, highlighting specific systems in ominous red. However, our long-range intelligence operations have identified a developing situation that will significantly alter this balance within the next 5 to 10 years. What situation? General Krexmoff demanded. The Kethmori Collective has been expanding far more aggressively than your intelligence services have detected, Dr. Martinez answered. They've developed new propulsion technologies that allow them to establish colonies at distances previously thought impossible. More importantly, they've formed alliances with 17 other species that your empire classified as primitive or irrelevant. Princess Zarayath felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. The Kethmori were a species the Empire had encountered and dismissed centuries ago, technologically advanced but lacking the unified government structure necessary for large-scale expansion. If they had somehow overcome that limitation. The alliance, Chen continued, represents a combined military and economic force that will exceed imperial capabilities within a decade. They've been studying your expansion patterns, your military strategies, and your economic vulnerabilities. Unlike humanity, their intentions toward the Empire are distinctly hostile. The star map shifted again, showing projected expansion routes that would put the Kethmori Alliance in position to attack the Empire's outer territories from multiple directions simultaneously. How do you know all this? Council member Thexera asked suspiciously. Because we've been monitoring them for the same length of time we've been monitoring you, Admiral Mitchell said, entering the chamber behind Chen. The difference is that our attempts at communication and cooperation with them were unsuccessful. Unsuccessful how? Emperor Veltar asked, though his tone suggested he suspected the answer would be disturbing. They attempted to conquer one of our outer colonies as a test of human military capabilities, Chen explained matter-of-factly. The engagement lasted approximately 14 minutes. Their entire battle fleet was destroyed without casualties on our side. 14 minutes, General Krexmoff repeated in disbelief. We tried to negotiate afterward, Admiral Mitchell continued. Offered them the same type of cooperative relationship we're discussing with you. They interpreted our restraint as weakness and launched attacks on 3 more human systems. Her expression grew cold. Those engagements were considerably shorter. Chen activated a new section of the star map, showing what had once been Kethmori territory. Several systems that should have shown busy colonies and industrial installations were now marked as empty space. We don't generally engage in genocide, he said quietly. But, when a species demonstrates that they cannot be reasoned with, and, when they continue to attack civilian targets after being shown the futility of their efforts, sometimes there are no good alternatives. The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just defeated the Kethmori, they had eliminated them so thoroughly that their worlds were uninhabitable. Yet Chen spoke about it with the same casual tone he used for discussing trade negotiations. The remaining alliance members, Dr. Martinez added, interpreted the Kethmori disappearance as a natural disaster or internal collapse. They don't realize what actually happened, but they've accelerated their expansion plans to fill the power vacuum. Their projected timeline for moving against Imperial territory has shortened from 15 years to 7. Emperor Veltar studied the displays with growing understanding. And, you're sharing this intelligence because? Because we prefer the Vorthak Empire to whatever would replace it, Chen said simply. Your methods of governance aren't particularly efficient, and your expansion has caused unnecessary suffering in some regions, but you've created stability across vast distances. You maintain trade routes, prevent smaller conflicts from escalating, and generally keep civilization functioning even if you do it through intimidation rather than cooperation. The alternative, Admiral Mitchell continued, is an alliance of species that views conquest as an end in itself rather than a means of creating order. They don't want to rule, they want to consume. Every world they take is stripped of resources and abandoned. Every species they encounter is either enslaved or eliminated. Princess Zarayath found herself staring at the projected expansion routes with growing horror. If the human intelligence was accurate, the Empire was facing an existential threat that would arrive within a decade. Their traditional military responses would be inadequate, their diplomatic options were already exhausted, and their economic leverage was meaningless against enemies who didn't want to trade. What are you proposing? She asked, though she suspected she already knew. A defensive alliance, Chen said. The Empire continues to govern its territory using whatever methods it prefers. Humanity continues to develop and expand in our own regions. But, when the Kethmori alliance moves against Imperial space, they'll find themselves facing not just Vorthak military might, but human capabilities as well. And, in return? Emperor Veltar asked. Access to human technology and expertise that could help solve some of the Empire's internal problems, Dr. Martinez explained. More efficient resource extraction that reduces the need for constant expansion. Economic systems that generate wealth rather than simply redistributing it. Military technologies that make conquest unnecessary by making defense absolutely certain. And, consultation, Chen added. Human analytical capabilities applied to imperial challenges. We're very good at finding solutions to problems that seem intractable. The chamber fell silent as the council absorbed what they were being offered. It wasn't surrender or conquest, it was evolution. The Empire could remain itself while gaining access to capabilities that would ensure its survival and, potentially, its prosperity. But, it would also mean acknowledging that humanity had capabilities the Empire lacked, and that acknowledgement would fundamentally change how the Vorthaks saw themselves and their place in the galaxy. We need time to consider, Emperor Veltar said finally. Of course, Chen agreed. But, not too much time. The Kethmori alliance is moving faster than we initially projected. They'll begin probing Imperial defenses within 2 years. As the humans prepared to leave, Princess Zarayath found herself with one final question. Admiral Chen, why did you reveal your true nature to us at all? You could have maintained your deception indefinitely. Chen paused at the chamber's entrance and smiled with that terrifyingly human expression. Because effective partnerships require trust, Princess. And trust requires truth. We needed you to understand what humanity really is before you could decide whether you wanted us as allies or enemies. And, he added as the entrance dilated behind him, we needed you to understand that the choice is genuinely yours to make. We're not forcing anything on you. We're simply making sure you have all the information necessary to choose wisely. As the humans departed, Princess Zarayath realized that the most frightening aspect of the entire situation was that she believed them. They were offering the Empire exactly what they claimed, a partnership that could ensure survival and prosperity in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. The question was whether the Empire could swallow its pride long enough to accept help from creatures they had dismissed as primitive. And whether they could do it before the real threats arrived. 2 years later, Princess Zaraeth stood in what had once been the Imperial War Room and marveled at how much everything had changed. The chamber itself looked almost identical to how it had always been: biomechanical walls pulsing with neural networks, organic displays showing tactical information from across the Empire, the same crystalline command thrones arranged in their traditional hierarchy. But the information flowing through those displays told a story of transformation that would have been unimaginable just 24 months before. The Vorthak Empire still existed. Emperor Veltar still ruled from his throne on Zenthri Prime. The military hierarchy remained intact, the colonial administrators continued their duties, and the vast bureaucratic machinery of imperial governance functioned exactly as it always had. But now, woven throughout every level of that ancient structure, was something entirely new. Human advisors worked alongside imperial administrators, their enhanced cognitive abilities identifying inefficiencies and optimization opportunities that had existed for centuries without being noticed. Human technology supplemented Vorthak bioengineering, creating hybrid systems that combined the best aspects of both approaches. Human analytical capabilities supported imperial decision-making, providing predictive models that allowed the Empire to solve problems before they became crises. Status report, Zaraeth requested as she settled into her command throne. As Crown Princess and, now Director of Imperial Human Cooperative Operations, she had become the primary liaison between the two civilizations, a role that had proven both fascinating and, occasionally, terrifying. Economic integration proceeding ahead of schedule, reported Administrator Velkoth, a mid-level bureaucrat who had adapted to working with human partners with remarkable enthusiasm. The new resource extraction techniques have increased productivity in the Outer Rim mining colonies by 347% while reducing environmental damage to negligible levels. Military cooperation shows similar progress, added General Krexmoth, who had initially been the most resistant to human collaboration but had become one of its strongest advocates after seeing the results. Imperial forces equipped with human-designed enhancement systems are showing combat effectiveness improvements that exceed our most optimistic projections. Zaraeth nodded, reviewing the data streams that flowed across her personal displays. The numbers were impressive, but they only told part of the story. The real transformation was more subtle and far more profound. Dr. Martinez, she said, addressing the human who had become her primary partner in managing the cooperative programs, what's your assessment of the cultural integration process? The human woman looked up from her own workstation, a hybrid device that combined Vorthak bioneural interfaces with human quantum processing systems. Better than we hoped, honestly. We were concerned that the fundamental differences between our species would create friction, but the opposite seems to be happening. Vorthak appreciation for strength and efficiency meshes well with human problem-solving approaches. Your people respect competence, and competence is something we can definitely provide. Plus, added Admiral Chen, who had become a permanent resident of the palace and served as the senior human representative to the Imperial Council, the Vorthak emphasis on loyalty and duty makes for very stable partnerships once trust is established. We don't have to worry about sudden reversals or hidden agendas. Through the chamber's main viewing portal, Zaraeth could see the orbital installations that had grown around Zenthri Prime over the past 2 years. What appeared to be traditional imperial biomechanical structures were actually hybrids that incorporated human technology in ways that enhanced rather than replaced existing systems. Defensive platforms that could respond to threats at quantum speeds. Industrial complexes that could reconfigure themselves to produce whatever was needed most. Research facilities where Vorthak and human scientists worked together to develop technologies that neither species could have created alone. Speaking of threats, General Krexmoth said, his tone shifting to combat alertness, our long-range sensors have detected Kethmori Alliance scouts in the Meridian sector. 3 probe ships, running enhanced stealth systems. Confirmed, Admiral Chen added, his own display showing tactical information that was being shared in real time between human and Imperial command systems. Our analysis suggests they're testing our response times and defensive capabilities. This is likely the beginning of their projected offensive campaign. Zaraeth felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and concern. The Kethmori alliance had grown exactly as the humans had predicted, absorbing smaller species and building a military force that represented a genuine threat to Imperial territory. But now, instead of facing that threat with traditional Vorthak methods, the Empire had options that would have seemed like science fiction just 2 years before. Defensive response, she asked. I'd recommend a demonstration rather than a confrontation, Dr. Martinez suggested. Something that shows them our enhanced capabilities without immediately escalating to full combat. Give them a chance to reconsider their expansion plans. Admiral Chen nodded agreement. The Kethmori respect strength, but they're not suicidal. If they understand what they're actually facing, they might choose negotiation over conquest. And if they don't? General Krexmoth asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Then, we show them why the original Kethmori civilization no longer exists, Chen replied matter-of-factly. The casual way the humans spoke about eliminating entire civilizations still sometimes unsettled Zarath, but she had come to understand that it wasn't cruelty, it was simple practicality. Humans had redesigned themselves to be optimally efficient at everything they did, including warfare. When conflict became necessary, they approached it with the same methodical competence they apply to economic planning or technological development. Implement the demonstration protocol, she decided. But be prepared to escalate if they interpret restraint as weakness. Already moving assets into position, Admiral Chen confirmed. The hybrid fleet will be in optimal configuration within 6 hours. That was another thing that still amazed Zarath, the speed at which human-imperial cooperation had developed effective military coordination. Traditional imperial fleets had required weeks of preparation for major operations. The hybrid forces could be deployed in hours, reconfigured in minutes, and adapted to changing tactical situations in real time. Princess, came a new voice from the chamber's entrance, incoming priority transmission from the Meridian sector. What appeared on the main display was the image of Captain Thekvar, a young Vorthak officer who commanded one of the new hybrid patrol vessels. Behind him, visible through the organic viewing ports of his ship, space was filled with the geometric precision of human-designed defensive formations. Your Highness, the captain reported, the Kethmori probe ships have been discouraged. They approached our patrol perimeter, we demonstrated our enhanced capabilities, and they withdrew immediately. No shots fired, no casualties, but their sensor readings should give their commanders a comprehensive understanding of what they're facing. Define demonstrated, General Krexmoth requested. We allowed them to observe our ships transitioning between quantum states, showed them weapon systems that could restructure matter at the molecular level, and let them scan defensive fields that operate by manipulating fundamental forces, Captain Thekvar explained. Nothing threatening, but comprehensive enough to make our capabilities clear. Admiral Chen smiled with satisfaction. Elegant. They now know that attacking Imperial space would result in their complete annihilation, but they haven't been given any excuse to claim we were aggressive. Will it be enough? Zarath asked. For the Kethmori, probably, Dr. Martinez replied after consulting her analysis systems. They're pragmatic enough to recognize insurmountable odds. But some of their alliance partners are less rational. We may still face challenges from species that prioritize ideology over survival. That was the reality of their new situation. The Imperial Human Alliance had created a defensive capability that exceeded anything in known space, but it also represented a fundamental shift in galactic power balances that would inevitably create new conflicts and challenges. Long-term projections? Zarath requested. Extremely positive, Chen answered immediately. The alliance model is proving so successful that other species are beginning to request similar arrangements. The Zektari Confederation has formally petitioned for observer status. The Melvani Trade Guild wants to discuss economic cooperation. Even some former imperial enemies are reconsidering their positions. Because they can see which way the wind is blowing, General Krexmoth added with grim satisfaction. Cooperation with us means access to technologies and capabilities that make traditional conquest obsolete. Opposition means facing military capabilities they can't match. Zarath leaned back in her command throne, reviewing the data flows that now represented routine monitoring of half the galaxy. In 2 years, the Empire had transformed from a powerful but limited civilization into something that was reshaping the fundamental nature of galactic politics. Dr. Martinez, she said finally, your people's initial assessment was correct. Cooperation does serve everyone's interests better than conflict. Most of the time, the human replied with a slight smile. Though we've also learned that sometimes you need to be prepared to demonstrate the alternatives. Which brings us to the next phase of our development, Admiral Chen added. We've successfully integrated our civilizations and created an effective defensive alliance. Now we need to decide what we want to accomplish with these combined capabilities. That was the question that had been growing in importance as the immediate threats were addressed and the partnership solidified. The Imperial Human Alliance possessed capabilities that exceeded anything else in known space. They could defend against any threat, influence any political situation, and solve problems that had previously seemed intractable. Expansion? General Krexmoth suggested, falling back on traditional Imperial thinking. Stabilization, Dr. Martinez countered. We have the ability to prevent conflicts before they start, to solve resource disputes through better technology, to make conquest unnecessary by making cooperation more profitable. Evolution, Chen added. We could help other species achieve the same kind of transformation that both our civilizations have undergone in their own ways, according to their own values, but with access to capabilities that let them transcend their current limitations. Princess Zarayath considered the options as data flowed around her, showing the real-time status of hundreds of worlds, thousands of species, and countless individual beings whose lives had been affected by what had begun as a simple diplomatic contact. All of them, she decided finally. We expand where expansion serves the cause of stability. We stabilize where stabilization prevents conflict. We help others evolve when they're ready to choose change. And we defend the choices we've made against anyone who would force us back into the limitations we've transcended. An ambitious program, Admiral Chen observed. A necessary one, Zarayath replied. We've proven that different species can work together to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Now we need to prove that this model can be extended across the galaxy without losing what makes each species unique. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's display suddenly shifted to show incoming communication requests from 17 different species, each seeking some form of contact or cooperation with the Imperial Human Alliance. Trade negotiations, defensive pacts, technology sharing agreements, cultural exchanges, the galaxy was recognizing that something fundamental had changed, and they wanted to be part of it. It seems, Dr. Martinez said with evident satisfaction, that we're not going to lack for opportunities to test our theories. Princess Zarayath looked around the chamber that had once been dedicated solely to Imperial military dominance and now served as the coordination center for a new form of galactic civilization. Human and Vortak personnel worked side by side, their different approaches complementing each other to create solutions that neither could have developed alone. It had begun with a simple question about what was hidden beneath a human suit. The answer had transformed not just the Empire, but the fundamental nature of what was possible when different forms of intelligence chose cooperation over conflict. And this, Zarayath realized, was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of species with different capabilities and different perspectives. If the Imperial human model could be extended and adapted, if other civilizations could be persuaded to choose collaboration over conquest, then, perhaps they were looking at the foundation of something unprecedented in galactic history, a truly cooperative civilization that transcended the limitations of any single species. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and opportunities that would require every bit of wisdom and capability they had developed together. But, for the first time since she had met Ambassador Chen, Princess Zarayath felt genuinely optimistic about what that future might hold. After all, they had already proven that the most dangerous assumptions were the ones that made you underestimate what others might be hiding beneath the surface. And they had learned that the greatest strength wasn't what you could accomplish alone, but what you could achieve when you truly understood how to work together. The galaxy was about to discover that lesson for itself.